Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, just a quick note on the format for today's session. Because we will be covering a number of important topics and introducing several structural components of Project Indela, I will be presenting from a prepared script to ensure that we move through the material clearly and within the time frame available. The first portion of the session will therefore be a structured presentation. We kindly ask that participants hold any questions or comments until the end of the presentation, where we will open the floor for discussion and engagement. Thank you for your understanding. Before we begin the formal proceedings, we would like to ground this discussion in respect for the cultural and traditional roots that cannabis holds within many South African communities. Cannabis has a long and deeply embedded history within indigenous knowledge systems and traditional healing practices across the country. It is therefore both appropriate and meaningful that we begin today's engagement with a blessing. It is my honor to invite Zainodine Simmers, a senior traditional leader of the Cochoqua and Kainaqua tribes, to open the session with a blessing prayer. Thank you, Zaino. If I can just ask you to open the meeting up for us. Thank you.
Hi, Molo Shabuam, Sanbonani Batubang Saubona, Vukani, Vuyani, Ukum Slope, Kaikwas, Tawidis Mere, Kaitiko, Kaisko, Kanua, Kwas Kores, call of the ancestors. Kangansia Botse, let us begin. Kangansia Botse, Kwida, Kaes Karma, Ikohoba, Netes Kona, Sawudare, Ninga Itse, Ninga Vire, Sida Itse, Sida Vire, Nang Itse, Sidaka Itse, Kaikan Ganse, Amase. Flock of our flocks, generations of our generations. Let our flocks graze the fields. Let our generations live to see another day. We give thanks and praise to the kings of kings, the lords of lords, the elect lion who rests upon the throne of the tribe of Judah. And the word out of my mouth, the word in our sight, in the name of the Most High, Rastafari, King Selassie, the first and forevermore. Kedamawi, Abakadus. Queen Omega I. King Alpha, bring the perfect balance. In the name of the Most High, Rastafari, King Selassie, the first and forevermore. Kaeza, Amase.
Respect. Thank you so much, Zainodine, for that meaningful opening. We do really appreciate love. Before we move into Project Indela, we would just like to briefly acknowledge some of the broader developments currently taking place within South Africa's cannabis policy environment. To provide a short contextual update, we have invited Brett Hilton Barber, the journalist and editor at Cannabis Africa, to share a brief overview based on recent developments covered in following regulatory developments across the sector, and will provide a short snapshot of where things currently stand.
I just wanted to alert everybody on the platform that something very, very interesting is taking place within the halls of Parliament at the moment. Last Friday, the Parliamentary Committee for Trade, Industry and Competition held its first meeting of the year. And this is the first time the state, the government, has started looking not at legalizing cannabis, which is a done deal, but at legalizing THC and what that actually means. So we got the first taste of how THC is going to be regulated. And interestingly, it looks like they're going to try, and as a harms prevention measure, they say, is to have a tax regime based on potency. The higher your THC potency in your flower, the more tax you'll pay. This is when they start introducing cannabis retail licenses, which might be later on this year. The other very interesting thing from a cultivation point of view is that it looks like they're going to provide permits for high THC cannabis cultivation, non-medical, non-hemp. And that will be a provincial permit that will be issued by the Department of Agriculture as part of the general move to get cannabis removed from the Department of Health and the control of SAPRA into being seen as an agricultural plant under the regulation of Department of Agriculture. But there was one very, very, very disturbing thing at the meeting, and that was an input from the Department of Justice. And it seems like they still are completely out of alignment with trade and industry, with agriculture, and with health, in fact, who are all starting to try and work together to create a comprehensive policy framework for cannabis. And the Department of Justice's guy said that under the Cannabis for Private Purposes Act, he expressly said that cannabis clubs were not allowed. They were illegal, he said. And this makes a platform or an engagement like this all the more important, because the cannabis community is going to have to drag the Justice Department screaming and kicking and spitting all the way to the regulation board to recognize clubs. It's not a done deal. And if we can show through models like AfriMeters, a kind of self-compliance model, they won't have any choice but to accept it. It's crazy that they could be talking about giving retail licenses, commercial licenses, and once from the DTIC, yet Justice Department is saying no to cannabis clubs. If you want to read more about it, go to Cannabis Africa, that's cannabis with a Z, and we've got much more information on it there. But I just thought that would be interesting information to share with everybody. Thanks, guys.
The cannabis landscape in South Africa continues to evolve, and while many discussions are taking place at policy level, there remains a clear need for structured operational frameworks within the sector. That is exactly where Project Indlela comes in. On behalf of SACA, I would like to sincerely thank everyone for taking the time to participate in today's discussion as we continue moving towards more structured development within South Africa's cannabis sector. Over the past several years, South Africa's cannabis reform journey has progressed through a number of significant constitutional and legislative milestones. However, as many of us working in the space understand, reform on paper does not automatically translate into operational clarity on the ground. What we are presenting today represents a shift in focus from dialogue towards structured implementation. During this session, we will introduce three core developments: the formation of the Joint Steering Committee, the launch of the SACA digital platform on AfriMeter, and the introduction of the SACA SOP governance pack. Each of these components represents a practical step towards greater coordination, accountability, and maturity within the cannabis club ecosystem. For those who would like to explore these tools after the session, all relevant links, including access to the SACA platform on AfriMeter, the SOP governance pack, and supporting resources are available on the SACA homepage. The link to the SACA digital platform on AfriMeter is also pinned in the chat. We encourage everyone in the sector to review these materials and participate in the pilot phase as we move forward. Before we proceed, we are going to provide some context on Project Indlela. To understand why initiatives such as Project Indlela are necessary, it is important to first recognize the reality of how cannabis clubs in South Africa emerged. The sale of cannabis has always remained a criminal offense under South African law. At the same time, the 2018 Concord ruling affirmed the right of adults to cultivate and use cannabis in private. This created quite a unique legal situation. Private use was constitutionally protected, but commercial trade remained prohibited. In response to this environment, many cannabis communities began organizing themselves through non-profit or private association club models, where members collectively cultivate and access cannabis within closed membership environments. These models were not designed to bypass the law. They were developed as practical attempts to operate within the constitutional protections of private cultivation while avoiding activities that would constitute illegal trade. At the same time, different approaches have also emerged. Some operators have explored commercial pathways, including Section 22 licensing frameworks. However, in many cases, the regulatory implementation of these routes remains unclear or inconsistently applied. There has been significant debate surrounding Section 22 within the cannabis sector. Nevertheless, it is important to recognize that many of the businesses operating within these frameworks are legitimate entrepreneurs who are also attempting to navigate the legal environment responsibly, with the intention of operating lawful establishments and contributing positively to the development of the sector. As a result, the current landscape includes a mixture of non-commercial cannabis club environments, hybrid models, and commercially orientated outlets, all attempting to operate within an evolving regulatory environment. Looking forward, it is entirely possible that South Africa will develop a clearer commercial cannabis framework. However, SACA believes that non-commercial cannabis clubs should be recognized within the broader regulatory ecosystem. Just as commercial operators may require licenses to trade, non-commercial clubs should be able to obtain appropriate permits or recognition that allow them to operate legally within a private use framework. This ensures that cannabis reform supports both economic development and community-based participation, rather than forcing all the activity into a purely commercial model. It is also important to briefly distinguish between commercial and non-commercial cannabis environments, as this distinction is often misunderstood in public discussions. Commercial cannabis markets are typically structured around licensed production, distribution, and retail, where cannabis products are bought and sold as part of a regulated commercial industry. Many countries around the world have moved in this direction, and it is entirely possible that South Africa will develop a commercial cannabis industry over time. However, commercial markets are not the only model that exists. In several jurisdictions, non-commercial cannabis environments operate alongside commercial systems, providing alternative frameworks based on private association, collective cultivation, and member-based access rather than open retail trade. Cannabis clubs falls within this category. The reason non-commercial models exist is because cannabis reform is not only about creating new industries, it is also about protecting the constitutional rights of private users and communities who cultivate collectively for personal use. A non-commercial environment offers several important benefits. First, it helps to ensure that the transition out of prohibition does not immediately concentrate the entire cannabis sector into large commercial entities. Second, it creates accessible participation pathways for communities, legacy growers, and small-scale participants who may not have the resources to enter highly regulated commercial markets. Third, it enables community-based governance models where accountability exists within a closed membership structure rather than an open retail marketplace. And finally, non-commercial environments maintain an important distinction between private use rights and commercial trade, particularly in legal environments that are still evolving. This does not mean that commercial and non-commercial models are in opposition. In many cases, they can coexist as complementary parts of a broader cannabis ecosystem. Project Indela's initial pilot phase focuses specifically on the non-commercial club environment, because currently that is where responsible governance and self-regulatory frameworks align with our constitutional rights. Before moving into those pillars, it is important to briefly introduce Project Indela, which forms the foundation of this implementation phase. The word Indlela means the way or the path in several South African languages, and that name was chosen very deliberately. Project Indela is designed to serve as a practical pathway towards structured governance for non-commercial cannabis clubs in South Africa. Rather than waiting indefinitely for perfect regulatory clarity to emerge, the project focuses on developing responsible operational frameworks from within the sector itself. At its core, Project Indela seeks to achieve three objectives. First is to establish structured governance standards that allow cannabis clubs to operate responsibly within the constitutional framework of private cultivation and use. Second, to generate credible data and operational insight that can support more constructive engagement with policymakers, regulators, and civil society. And third, to demonstrate that the cannabis club ecosystem can organize itself professionally with accountability, transparency, and shared governance principles. Importantly, Project Indela is not a licensing program, and it is not a commercial initiative. It is a sector-led pilot framework designed to test governance models, refine operational standards, and build the institutional infrastructure necessary for long-term sector stability. The three pillars we introduced today, the Joint Steering Committee, the SACA platform on Afrimeter, and the SOP governance pack of the practical mechanisms through which Project Indlela will be implemented. Together, they form the structural foundation that allows the sector to move from informal emergence toward responsible and coordinated development. The first pillar we introduced today is the Joint Steering Committee. Its purpose is to provide structured coordination for the implementation of Project Indlela. The committee will oversee the implementation of Project Indlela, governance alignment, pilot oversight, stakeholder engagement, and responsible sector representation. It is once again important to clarify what the committee is not. It's not a regulatory authority, and it's not a licensing body, and it's not a commercial board. Instead, it functions as a coordination and oversight mechanism, ensuring that implementation decisions are not made in isolation, but through structured consultation and collective governance. Its responsibilities include upholding governance standards, monitoring pilot environments, reviewing sector data generated through the platform, maintaining alignment with non-commercial principles, and safeguarding the integrity of the SACA framework. This represents a move away from the fragmented operations towards a collectively responsible and coordinated governance. The Joint Committee currently consists of Albertus van Jaarsveld, myself, representing the South African Cannabis Club Alliance and the Canna Club, Kobus Skuman, which represents Grow on Africa and Afrimeter, Yolandi Montgomery, representing Joint Venture Collective and Leap Year Software, and Denrik Plaatjes, representing the Green Horizon Beta Hub and the Beta House of Rastafari. And yes, the intention is for the Joint Steering Committee to expand over time as the project develops and additional expertise become necessary. The second pillar is digital infrastructure. The SACA platform hosted on Afrimeter represents the backbone of structured implementation. Afrimeter is a digital compliance and management ecosystem capable of supporting CRM, ERP, and operational modules. Within the SACA environment, the platform will support structured data collection from participating clubs, governance reporting, operational standardization, pilot monitoring, administrative consistency, and long-term sector data insights. It is important to emphasize once again what this platform is not. It is not surveillance, it is not enforcement, and it is not a commercial registry, and it is not an unlimited onboarding system. Instead, it provides digital compliance tools and sector infrastructure. Without reliable data and structured reporting, engagements with policymakers remain speculative. With credible data, engagement becomes evidence-based. The platform therefore moves the sector from narrative-driven advocacy towards measurable operational credibility. To help bring this concept to life, we have asked Kobus Skuman from Afrimeter to briefly demonstrate how the SACA platform will function in practice. Kobus has been instrumental in developing the Afrimeter ecosystem and working with SACA to structure the digital infrastructure that will support the Project Indlela pilot phase. He will now provide a short overview of how the platform operates and how it will support governance, reporting, and data collection within the SACA framework. Kobus, if I can just ask if you're here.
I'm here. Thanks a lot, Bertie. Good morning, everybody
Lekker.
else. Bertie, if you can just maybe stop presenting on that side, then I will share my screen. And I see it's already afternoon. Thank you very much. I think you really did well with the introduction there and to explain exactly what this is all about. So, as Bertie mentioned, the SACA has just started using the Afrimeter platform, and this is to conduct surveys as well as complete certain forms and to operationalize the non-commercial pilot project that we were just speaking about, or that Bertie was speaking about. So I just want to I just want to share the correct screen. And this is like a boring screen. These are my notes, and I just want to touch base on the things to make sure we tick all of the boxes. Now, first of all, as Bertie has explained, SACA has required a platform to interact with the public, and now SACA is a tenant on AfriMeter, where surveys and forms can be, or surveys can be conducted and forms completed. Now, this pilot project is for our non-commercial clubs to collaborate, as well as submit proposals for governance to the relevant government departments. And there are sets of surveys that will be made available to anyone to give their inputs. And I think we can use this as a tool for SACA to gather the public's voice on any matters related to the way forward, because I know we will get opportunity to give inputs into commercial legislation pretty soon, and this could be, these surveys and questionnaires could also help get that information in. Now, we're saying that the first pilot project is for non-commercial clubs, and what does that exactly mean? Now, this non-commercial club operation is categorized by these three foundational principles: non-profitability, secondly, safe supply following responsible demand, and thirdly, restricted point of access. These are harm reduction vehicles within the community, not trying to drive new sales, but only trying to meet private demand of the members of its community. Now, part of this pilot non-commercial project, clubs and growers and processors will be requested to submit information, which I'll show you on the forms now. And just to understand the logic behind why this data is collected, is if you want to prove your non-profit status, then we're going to require a person's ID or a CIPC document or SARS document, bank documents, to show your non-profit status. Secondly, to show that safe supply follows responsible demand, the pilot will collect information on cannabis that is harvested, cannabis that is dispatched, processed, and shared with members. And to show that you have a restricted point of access, the forms will require information on your member management, require one or two pictures to show that your club is private or that you have signage up or things like that. Now, who this is for, anyone can register and complete the surveys. And anyone who wants to participate in a non-commercial pilot project can start with an orientation form and then proceed to complete all the required forms. And all participants will be vetted during the onboarding and throughout the reporting to ensure there's compliance to the pilot project guidelines. So the QR code that will be circulated would look something like this. And let's just get to the system. Now, I'm sure I'll have to change my screen share. Sorry, guys. So when you get your link, this is like any other system. You'll first have to register, complete your registration. And with your registration, you can create your login credentials. So I'm just going to have a fake email at fakeemail.com. And create a password. Sorry, I'm trying to do it on the fly here. And then you are into the system. So the system, like I said, sorry guys, I'm typing too fast for myself. And I wanted to show you how user-friendly it is, but it doesn't help if the user is doing idiot errors. So once logged into the system, you will see that you prompted with your fake name or that you registered with, welcome to SACA, and then that you have to start with your workspace. Now you'll see AfriMeter hosts other workspaces as well, and in future you can look more into that. For today's purposes, you are interested in SACA. Now, what the AfriMeter system helps with is once you create your profile and update your profile, You can use all of this information in future form fills. So you own your data. It is not available to anybody else until such time as you submit it in a form, in a specific form. So you can always keep your things up to date, and when there's any new forms to fill out, you can use the autocomplete function on the form to fill in that data. So that's just where Afrimeter makes it easy for you to submit all of these forms. So I'm not going to complete a full profile now. Those are pretty standard questions. But when you are met with your home page, you will see that you've got an application section and basically one of two choices. If you are looking to understand Project Inglela's purpose, the processes and those kind of things before you onboard, then do the orientation. If you only want to do a survey and help SACA to give proper inputs of what the public's opinions are, then complete a survey. With each survey that you completed, a new survey will be made available. And in due time, SACA will also launch certain survey campaigns. So you're welcome to complete as many surveys as you want. I'm going to focus today on the pilot project. So like I said, there's an orientation to do. I'm just going to use this as an example because all the follow-up forms work exactly the same. You know exactly what form you're busy completing. You can see your progress overview, and you can save a draft and return to your form at any point. You don't have to redo it or start from scratch. You'll see a bit of a summary. This is a very basic form, and it will take you 10 minutes at most. That starts with an explainer, visually taking you through the process and showing you exactly what it is that is required from you. So the orientation will just be a confirmation, and that will take you on to your next set of forms. I'm just going to switch to another user so that I can show you guys the rest of the forms. This is just what you can expect when you sign in for the first time. I'm signing in from administrative level, so I can see the applications and all the analytics on that. But I want to point your attention to the forms, for example, the onboarding form. Now, to understand this, after the orientation, you'll have to onboard into the pilot project as either a club or a grower or a processor or an association. You can use this onboarding form multiple times for each of the applications. So for this one, I'll do Cobus Club, and all the information in this form then I will submit on behalf of my club. You'll see there either club, grower or processing hub. Now, all of this information you'll see some are required and some are not. But as soon as this is submitted, your onboarding gets approval from SACA to ensure that you meet the minimum requirements. And then the next set of forms are issued to you. Now, I'm not going to go into much detail on the next set of forms. What I am going to tell you is clubs are required twice a month to submit their sharing history, as we call it, how much cannabis went out at the club, as well as reporting on all of the cannabis that comes into the club. Growers will be expected to report on all cannabis batches that are harvested and that are dispatched to clubs. And processors will be expected to report on batches coming in and batches going out. Now, all of that information is then available to SACA so that we can put this into similar dashboards that we can provide to the different government departments and to regulators, so that we can get the classification we require, the non-commercial classification for our clubs and growers, which will inform future permitting and licenses. So at this stage, for those interested in becoming participants, please use the link. I'll post it in the chat again now with a QR code. you will start your new application. And the first one I showed you was the orientation, which gives you everything, all of the information. And you should know exactly what you're signing up for as soon as you've gone through orientation. The onboarding is your next step. And then from there, you'll get communication from SACA as soon as you are approved, as well as receive the other forms for other reporting. Now, this is just the very initial phases of this project. One of the forms that will become available to you once you've done your onboarding is a systems integration form, because we would much rather integrate with other systems and groups via API or uploaded CSV and things like that to make the reporting a lot easier. For example, the Grow on Africa clubs have already started discussions to see how to integrate with API or to upload a CSV, which will mean that everybody in their group using the Goa Light system can automatically can onboard and then automatically have their reporting put on here without any additional work. So Bertie, I'm going to leave it for now. I think it's more important that when there is an option for questions, that people ask specific questions. But I think the most important thing for now is to understand that there are clubs and growers and processors that will start onboarding onto the SACA platform from today using this link. The next thing is that we will do targeted onboardings with other groups where we want to contact other groups and explain the process and the benefits of uniting under a pilot project. And then as soon as onboarding is done, people can start reporting and also ensuring that those clubs with existing systems who want to integrate can integrate. And our intention is for the clubs to start being able to share their members as soon as possible, so that we start having membership visitors, membership arrangement between clubs. The next step could be to start sharing cultivators. So this could be a very exciting move for clubs to unite while still following their own rules, using their own systems, and just uniting under the non-commercial banner. But that's it from me for now. Scan this QR code if you want to complete a survey or if you want to go and check out the orientation. And like I said, you are in control of all of that data. It's not accessible to anybody else unless except for the data that you choose to share as part of the pilot project. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions when the appropriate time is there.
As we can see, the platform provides the digital infrastructure necessary to support structured governance and credible sector data. This kind of infrastructure is essential if the cannabis club ecosystem is to move from informal operation towards recognized institutional maturity. We will now move to the third pillar of the implementation framework. The third pillar, and arguably the most important operational step, is the SACA SOP Governance Pack. The SOP Pack introduces structured governance guidelines for cannabis clubs operating within a non-commercial private use framework. The objective is simple: to create consistency, reduce risk, and promote responsible operational standards. The SOP covers all areas such as membership management, cultivation oversight, product handling and storage, record keeping, data reporting, governance structures, compliance alignment, and risk mitigation protocols. It's important to note that these guidelines are not law. They are sector-led governance standards. By adopting shared governance frameworks, clubs reduce ambiguity and strengthen collective legitimacy. The SOP Pack is about discipline, clarity, and responsibility, and it demonstrates that the cannabis club ecosystem can self-organize professionally. Taken together, these three pillars represent a shift from informal emergence to structured implementation, from fragmented operations to coordinated governance, and from reactive advocacy to proactive infrastructure. This phase does not represent a promise, of immediate mass inclusion. Early implementation requires focus and discipline. However, the long-term vision remains grounded in inclusive participation, where structured frameworks create pathways for historically marginalized communities to participate responsibly and sustainably. Inclusion without structure creates instability. Structure creates sustainable inclusion. Before we conclude today's session, I would like to briefly reflect on what this moment represents. South Africa's cannabis reform journey is still unfolding. The Concord created a historic shift when it affirmed the right of adults to cultivate and use cannabis in private. Yet, as we all know, translating constitutional principles into practical governance is never instantaneous. That is the gap we are working to address. Project Indela represents a sector-led effort to bring structure, responsibility, and coordination into an environment that has until now largely developed informally. Regulators, and it is not to bypass the law, and it is not to create a parallel authority. Rather, the intention is to demonstrate that the cannabis club ecosystem in South Africa is capable of organizing itself responsibly with governance standards, operational discipline, transparent reporting, and collective accountability. Through the Joint Steering Committee, we create coordinated oversight. Through the AfriMeter platform, we build digital infrastructure and credible sector data. And through the SOP governance pack, we establish shared operational standards. These are practical steps towards sector maturity. It is also important to recognize that cannabis reform is not only about markets or commercial opportunity. It is about protecting constitutional rights, supporting community participation, and ensuring that the transition out of prohibition does not leave behind the communities who carried this plant through decades of criminalization. Non-commercial cannabis clubs represent one possible pathway for achieving that balance. But for that pathway to be taken seriously, it must be structured, responsible, and transparent. That is exactly what Project Indela aims to demonstrate. Today's session marks the beginning of the pilot phase. It is not the final destination, but rather the first step on a longer road towards clarity, legitimacy, and sustainable governance. As part of the pilot phase, we will be making the SACA platform links available to the sector, along with access to the SACA SOP governance pack. We strongly encourage cannabis clubs, operators, and stakeholders across the sector to join the SACA platform and participate in the pilot process. Within the platform, you will find a series of structured surveys designed to collect operational data from cannabis club environments across the country. These surveys are quick and straightforward to complete, and they unlock sequentially as each section is completed. The data generated through this process will play a critical role in informing SACA's final submission to the various government departments, helping to ensure that the regulatory framework reflects the real operational realities of cannabis clubs in South Africa. The SOP governance pack that we introduced today should be understood as a living framework. It currently represents a foundational governance skeleton, which will continue to be refined through the pilot process, with the aim of developing a more comprehensive governance standard by the third quarter of 2026. The success of this initiative ultimately depends on participation from the sector itself. The more clubs and stakeholders who contribute data, insight, and feedback, the stronger, more credible the final framework will be. We therefore invite everyone in the sector to participate in this process, contribute to the platform, and help shape the future governance framework for non-commercial cannabis clubs in South Africa. We thank everyone who continues to engage constructively in this process: policymakers, community leaders, entrepreneurs, civil society organizations, and the many individuals who care deeply about responsible cannabis reform in South Africa. Your participation is what allows the sector to evolve with maturity rather than conflict. Thank you again for joining us today, and we now welcome your questions and open discussion.
Albertus,
the work is crowned and sealed already. Kaeza, Amase.
Albertus.
Hi, Colin.
Hi, Colin Levy here. How are you?
Good, thank you. Fantastic.
My apologies for joining late. I heard quite a bit of what you said. I just would like to have some sort of clarity on this lot. as we stand at the moment with all these shops, whatever you want to call them, that are selling THC containing cannabis around the country, how legitimately does one get product to those guys?
There is no legitimate avenue or regulations under South African cannabis law. Like we've clearly stated, the only rights that we have are those constitutional rights to privately consume and cultivate cannabis. So we've got to work within those constitutional guidelines. But what one can do individually, we can do collectively. So hence the non-commercial model. As far as our understanding, that is the only legitimate avenue or the only lawful way that I am aware of.
Okay. Okay, but the point is that all of these places are selling product for gain. So I'm a pharmacist in a licensed facility, and I can't sell to these people. Now, I don't know how they're getting stock all over the place, and I can only sell on export flour.
100%. That is the big crux of the situation. And that is exactly our suggestion, and it's mentioned in Brett's article as well, is that we allow, the licensed facilities to distribute through those outlets, because there's something like 8,000 different outlets. But then it must be taxed properly, and, it must go through a regulated system to ensure the consumer safety at the end of the day. And at the same time, we must make sure that doesn't push out our small-scale growers on the field that can't afford to participate in those markets. So I do have faith that in future that licensed facilities should be able to distribute lawfully through these outlets. At the moment, they are doing it under the guise of Section 22, which is up to scrutiny. But it still needs clear regulations around that. But we feel that licensed facilities should be able to distribute to those retail outlets or dispensaries, as you call it.
Okay, but pharmautically, I mean, I have a major problem with what you guys are saying. I hope you get it right and sort this thing out. My problem is that everybody's turning a blind eye to it. The longer everybody turns a blind eye to it, the worse the industry becomes, and the least chance you have of anybody trying to regulate the industry. It's to me, it's got nothing to do with tax. Tax is just a government way of gaining revenue. It's about the legitimacy of sale of this product through being either legitimized through through SAHPRA or DWAF or DALRID or whoever it is.
Yes.
One of the reasons why I think that we are where we are is that the continuous bickering between DALRID, DAF, and SAHPRA as to who's controlling this industry, because nobody is.
Yes, 100%. I think Zaino Simmers, do you want to answer there to Colin? I see you've got your hand raised. Yeah, Colin, it's a tricky space we're navigating at the moment because there's such a lack of regulations, So that's what we're attempting to do through SACA, is to demonstrate that we set governance principles, to sort that out so that there aren't just shops on every corner, so that there is some set of rules and formalities, a structure around the sector. So that's what we aim to do by through interacting with the various associations and club networks to establish some form of minimal requirements to make it lawful, and we want to interact with our government as well to assist them in the regulatory process.
But surely step number one should be dealing with the SAHPRA and the SAHPRA regulations, because as I understand it, and I might be wrong, I'm happy that anybody corrects me, that while we are dealing with tetrahydrocannabinol and its derivatives, right, this is theoretically a Schedule 6 item. Schedule 6 items cannot be sold by non-pharmacists. Now, isn't that where you should be trying to get the stuff deregulated for sale that way? Because currently, every single person who sells a cannabis product is in contravention of the law because it's not supposed to be sold.
110%, Colin. I agree with you there. That's why within I think it was our first or second webinar, we had some governmental departments present, and we addressed exactly that. We said that because it doesn't make sense that it is regulated the same as other harmful substances or regulated substances. It just doesn't make sense. So we need to deschedule it as well.
All right. Let's just hear what Zaina has to say, because I see he's raised his hand to say something.
Yeah, please, Zaina.
Hi, good day. Just an idea. If pharmacists the growers or facilities can integrate local cultivators, combine it in a NPC, and then create lots for those growers on your facility. So that's how you integrate. You understand what I'm saying? Creating a new way of integrating local growers into your facility so that the bud can have some local control as well when it, streaming to the market from one place, Thanks so much.
Zaina, I'm going to answer you there and say that in theory, it sounds great. The problem is that the licensed facilities currently are under strict guidelines of SAPRA in terms of SOPs, controls, and what have you. There's no leeway to move either way. Now, we know as licensed growers that there's a very big difference between somebody who's been forced to, in inverted commas, to put in fancy HVAC systems and everything, to somebody who's growing the stuff commercially in the call it a feedlot outdoors, in an outdoor grow. And I'm not even comparing it to a greenhouse grow. I'm comparing it to the number of people that are growing simply outdoors.
Yeah, you see, the thing is, what we argue is cannabis wouldn't have been available today if it wasn't for the indigenous communities that carry this plant. And they simply don't have the resources to set up a big GMP facility. That's why we need to look at other avenues so that all the commercial enterprises don't push our legacy growers out, because they are the custodians of the plant here. So we need to ensure that they also participate in the sector.
I understand fully and appreciate the sentiment that we shouldn't be pushing legacy growers out. But I think the strains that are available that everybody's growing today are not the legacy strains that are being made available there. But that's a different kettle of fish, a different discussion. I think the strains that are available today have been genetically modified and mutated way beyond Durban poison and Malawi gold, for example.
But people in the townships are getting arrested.
I do agree, I do agree. I see Green Alchemist has got his hand up. I think we'll take him now. I do agree we have to protect those people. I'm not saying that we don't protect them at all. There needs to be an avenue like there is for traditional medicine. So if you go to a traditional healer, and these are the people that you're talking about who are using various products of the soil to treat people who believe in them, there has to be an opening for them to be able to ply that trade. But it's vastly different to the guys who are putting up multi-million rand infrastructures to try and grow the stuff medicinally. Let's just take Green Alchemy, and then you guys can shout me down.
Okay.
Just everything from my side. Back in 2015, no one even knew about cannabis and medicine. When I approached government and everything, it was a laughing stock. I cured myself from MRSA with no scientific backing. No doctors would help me. No pharmacist was willing to even consider the thought of cannabis as medicine. But now today, all the high-level guys like yourself, Colin, are taking the reins and saying, no, but it has to be done this way. The medicine was done via we doing it in the backyard, man. because there was nothing available. And now,
Guys,
because of that, you guys are saying, no, we got to look at all these different regulations and stuff. And I feel that's very, very wrong. Because if you look at the traditional way of medicine, we've got longer backing than any of you have ever had. And I feel that we really need to look at a way that we integrate the traditional knowledges of the country and really say, listen, this is scientific fact. Because you guys need to wake up. It's not us.
no, I think you're being a little bit harsh there. I don't know what your name is. You're welcome to know who I am, and I have no problem in stating that. The fact that you've been going since 2018, you think that there are none of us professional people that have been doing it, but professional or not professional, I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is that SAPRA are the custodians of all of this, and the idea is not to fight them, but to work with them.
Yeah.
You might have missed what I said earlier on when I said we need to protect the traditional growers, not protect the guys who want to commercialize this thing. But the traditional growers have to be protected, because I agree with what I think it was Tiamo, whoever said earlier on, right? They might have kept this thing going all the time, okay? I know, and I have friends that have bought and sold cannabis for the last 20 years. I'm fully aware of all of this. I have a business partner who did a lot of research long before the CBD thing broke in the market. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say to you, guys, we need to interact with SAPRA in a manner that we look after the traditional healers, right? And make provision for the professional commercial growers. But they two can't cross over in the marketplace, because then you get this proliferation of product that's being used for reasons other than what it was designed to be. So if we are all going to be honest, then we say, guys, it's a recreational drug. We need to have this recreational drug legitimized. If we say it's a medicine, right, then you protect the traditional healers and you protect the people that are growing, that are enabling the doctors to use the product. I will tell you that on our overseas market, I've designed effervescent tablets containing THC, which I send to Australia, I say legitimately, to Australia, to Germany, to England, all over the place, okay? But then it's being used medicinally. So, and that's a different category to what we're talking about.
Can
I just want to quickly respond there. Sorry, Zaino. Just quickly, one thing. With the medicinal, it's important to note that through these Section 22 clubs, all of them do it under the guise of medicinal, but a very large minority of that, I would say almost lower than 5% of those actually do it for medicinal purposes. So
absolutely correct.
Yes,
You're
sorry,
100%,
Zaino.
you're 100% correct, and it's Section 21, not Section 22.
Thank you. Thanks for that correction.
Hi guys, so I've been listening to you speak about the different sections, but as indigenous community, what happened was that we voiced out our concern that we are not involved, and then what happened is that we the SACA, they put out the article, which we are very thankful for, because they were the voice of our indigenous people. And then after that, we went on Power FM. We also voiced that we need to diversify somehow. What happened from there is now that we are on a GMP facility. I've got, say, 23 from home that didn't have a work, that was selling back from the street. They are working at the moment. And they have an opportunity to also, because of the facility, is also have NPC relations and restaurants and things. They also have a chance to have a membership. You understand what I'm saying? Because they ultimately, the workers also are your consumers, especially if you have livestock and things like that. You understand what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is that your local community can also work for you per hour, per rate. Integrate them. You understand what I'm saying? Because if you can integrate the foreigners and those as laborers, you can, I'm telling you, how we don't have work. And the day that we got the call up, the next day we were overfilled. It was a shock. There were people there ready to work on the facilities, going at it, training. You understand? One or two were messing around, but that was eliminated. But like I'm saying, because of integration and because of voice and concern, we got to integrate our indigenous community into a GMP setting. Now they can build a training record and an evaluation which they can take home after a few years or after a few months and say that, listen, I'm trained in trimming, I'm trained in greenhouse, irrigation, I'm trained in, I can now do this at another facility. I can now we can start our own facility at home. We have built a file with employees, with our hours. We have experience now. So those are the other type of things we're looking at. So that will eliminate having competition also to sell. But because you, as the local control, you understand, you have all the means to produce tons. You can HVAC diamonds. You can do everything these people want already. And they are your consumers as well. You understand, at the end of the day, because you are providing them a space to work, paying them for hours, and the facility produces everything for them to purchase and take home as well in a NPC setting that you can also register for yourself. You understand? It's simple as that, and that is how your pharmacist setting can also get to a socialism, because socialism is where medicine come from, because we use it culturally first, spiritually. We use this thing. So that is firstly from all science comes spiritualism. You understand? So if we can embrace the socialism part, recreational part, which I don't want it to be called that name. It must be the spiritual side of this thing, where it brings people together, connects people in cultural ceremony. Firstly, you can integrate that by saying joining the SACA MPC format and having your workers, because I bet you if you have 100 workers, you have a community already that can integrate as a solution to sell your mids, to sell your offset that doesn't go to export, because everything doesn't go to export. You understand what I'm saying? Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. To respond to that, Colin?
I don't know that we're talking the same story. At the moment, the battle, as I understand it, is really between SAPRA and Dalrud and DWAF as to who is in control of the product. Okay? And whoever is in control of the product should be controlling the right of sale and everything.
We don't feel that the plant should or can be controlled. It should be placed back into the hands of the people. And that's where we need to look at, you're right, restructuring so that SAPRA doesn't own the plant, because it doesn't make sense that we regulate a plant the same as we do pills that have a lot more potential for harm or abuse. I just don't think it is scheduled correctly, medicine in the in the Medicines Act, because that is all based on still old apartheid-based era politics. So we need to look at reframing that.
I don't believe that. I don't believe it's got anything to do with old politics. I think it is currently where it is. But the question I'm going to then ask you is that on what basis are you guys integrating with SAPRA in order to motivate them to move from where they are to a much less rigid position? Because that's the way you work with government institutions.
Yes, that's a good question, Colin. Thanks for addressing that. And we do intend to interact with SAPRA, other organizations such as Fields of Green for All and Sachida has made, they constantly interacting with those government departments. So far, we've been looking more towards DTIC and Department of Justice. But yes, it's something that we need to pull SAPRA in and address this. as far as I understand, with the updates that Brett has provided, they are looking at that, putting so that the Department of Agriculture can issue high THC permits for our legacy growers. So we'll see where all this goes. But our role is simple. It is just to ensure that cannabis clubs and collective cultivation is recognized in the upcoming laws.
But I mean, surely that, to ensure that's done, you have to interact with SAPRA. You can't interact with somebody who's not the custodian of the law and hope to change the law without him.
Yeah, so we interact with all various government departments, Colin, including SAPRA. We do send our communications to them. So we're doing the best that we can within our administrative capacity. And we do encourage all participants here in the discussion to do the same, because it's up to the collective effort of the industry. It's not one person can do it all by themselves at the end of the day.
But the point is that everybody does it individually, then you are all individuals. If everybody does it collectively as one unit with one mouthpiece, you're normally going to stand a better chance of swaying the regulator.
That's exactly what we're doing here, Colin.
Okay, that's fine.
Well, thank you for your feedback. Yeah, we're doing our best, and we're doing it with a good intention. It's not to monopolize the industry; it's to prevent that, and to make sure that our legacy growers don't get left behind, and our small communities can participate in the sector, as they already are through the grey markets. But we just need to formalize that market so that we can have safe product to the consumer at the end of the day. And I just want to make it very clear once again that the commercial and the non-commercial market can completely coexist. We are also lobbying for the licensed facilities to have local offset. So, we at the end of the day, we consider everyone, because at the end of the day, this plant has to benefit everyone, especially our custodians.
Sure. Look, it sounds like to me that the intentions are good. I might disagree with the mechanism that you guys are using, but I mean, that's not for discussion here. Continue.
Appreciate any criticism, and you have contacted me previously. We'll stay in touch, because it's those kind of inputs that help us to refine our efforts and to refine our efforts and do it more effectively. So thank you for your feedback, and I take it with a positive note, and I will stay in touch with you. Thanks, Colin.
Sure. Just Zaino's trying to say something.
Thank you.
Hi guys, just one last thing, eh? I walked into a shop, and it said Section 21 menu, and you could buy bud over the counter without filling in a medical prescription or getting a doctor's prescription. Can you elaborate on that, please?
I've got nothing to say, Zaino. That's what it is. We'll probably walk into the next shop and it'll be the same, or maybe something a little bit different. But that's, welcome to the unregulated market. And that's, that's what we aim to address collectively. It'll take some time.
Can I explain to you what Section 21 really is? If it's just a matter of interest, because to me, as a pharmacist, this whole thing, and I'm sorry to use the terminology, is bullshit. Because Section 21 is a provision under SAPRA for a local person in this country to use a product registered in another country, not currently registered in this country. That's Section 21 permits. But it's been bastardized by SAPRA themselves.
Exactly. See, we're speaking the same language, Colin.
So it's a very difficult thing for many of us as pharmacists to understand how this happens, because how does one give out a non-pharmacist or a non-traditional healer give out a product that is theoretically in this country a scheduled substance, a habit-forming drug, yet you can't go to the pharmacy and you can't buy some Ponstan, which is Schedule 3. He may not give it to you. None of this stuff makes sense.
No, not at all. Not at all, Colin. And as I say, that's what we need to address. And I think government is slowly starting to wake up to the reality. I'm going to drop a link to that article of Brett's. I'm not sure whether you saw it, based on all the latest parliamentary updates, but it looks like they are looking to move away from that. We must just wait and see what happens. But it's important for us as civil society to also have our voices heard and lobby collectively to interact with these government departments and also educate them on the realities on the ground.
Sean,
Check,
you got it.
Kobus?
Tussen die bome.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I think on that point, Bertie and Colin, to answer your question directly, because it's a topic that all of us just sidestep every time, how they are currently pulling off the Section 21, Section 22C cultivation permit scam, or 22A in some cases, is organized crime posing either as a compliance or security company offering systems that connect so-called patients with so-called doctors and pharmacists. These are organized crime networks who go to facilities, who sidestep the compliance by reporting stock as either not meeting grade or being molded or something like that. They then supply this cannabis to the so-called Section 21 dispensaries, and it's very difficult for police. I've had personal conversations with high-ranking officials expressing their frustration because they walk into a shop, but they're not allowed to go and check the certificate until they have the warrant for it. But most of those certificates are being used without the consent or sometimes knowledge of the 22C or 22A license holder. The site file usually contains the copy of that same cultivation permit. And then there's usually an online portal with a few dodgy doctors that send scripts, or at least keep the books up to date, that each location receives a few scripts a month. So I think it's good just to put it out there. There's been some horrific stories where people have received half of the stock they ordered and then have been threatened with their lives to pay the full amount. These companies also charge levies for transporting cannabis. So this is directly feeding into organized crime. And I think it's very important to know that from the onset. And this is the conundrum that government is facing. As part of the comments on the Private Purposes Act, this was also one big thing that we tried to put out there is, yes, we understand our non-commercial model is not perfect by a long shot, but we do feel that it offers a lot of learnings with responsible, ethical inputs so that we can really open up this industry, because the free-for-all that's currently happening is only benefiting the few, and in our country that means organized crime and the real gangsters. So yeah, I just thought we had to put it out there. Thanks, Helen.
Brilliantly put, Kobus. You've figured that Tamaleki out. That's very well structured and put together to understand. So thank you so much for that. Yeah, guys, is there anyone else that wants to contribute to the conversation whilst we still have time here? Yeah, just want to thank everyone once again for making the time today, for engaging in this discussion and attending the presentation. Once again, we encourage everyone to go on board onto the SACA platform on Afrimeter, where you can complete the surveys. Those surveys are going to be instrumental in our submissions towards the various government departments. So yeah, we're all in this together. We're counting on everyone to participate, and yeah, we do appreciate you. Thank you so much, and we wish everyone a blessed day out there.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, all bad.
Blessings.
Thank you, Colin. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
Kayeza amase.
Amase.